Hey everyone, welcome back to Melinda in Miami. I'm Melinda DeSeta, your sex therapist. This month, October, is all about GLBTQIA. This month, we honor the leaders and the people who fought for equal rights. This month is all about taking the time to realize where society needs to grow to continue equal rights, beating down microaggressions, and full-on aggressions towards this community. So I'm so excited to celebrate with you. I have brought on my colleague, Roxanna Tefell, and she specializes in working with people who identify as transgender and non-binary. Now, if you don't know what non-binary means, that's okay. She is going to tell you exactly what it means and if this is something that you are experiencing in your life or you know someone who is going through this as well. So to begin, let's introduce Roxanna Tefell. She is a licensed psychotherapist. She has a private practice here in Miami who focuses on working with people who identify as transgender and non-binary. And she's going to tell you how she helps them, some of the struggles that this community is going through, and how you can do your part in helping.
Hi, Roxanna. Thank you so much for being on the show today and for celebrating LGBTQIA month. And we're celebrating in October. Just want to clarify for everybody that Pride is celebrated in June. And we celebrate in June from the Stonewall riots that happened in Greenwich Village back in '69. And all the people who fought and protested for equality. And now in October, we're celebrating that. So this is GLBTQIA month, and we're here to celebrate the leaders and everybody who fought for equality. But I think it's also a time in the year where we recognize where we still need to grow as a society and where equality needs to grow. So Roxanna, I'm so excited that you're here. Can you just tell our listeners a little bit about your practice and what clients you work with?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to talk about LGBT things. So my practice is in Miami, Florida, and it's mainly with gender identity is my specialty. So I work a lot with teens and adults that either identify as transgender or non-binary or questioning their identity. And so I help them to figure those things out, as well as general mental health related things.
So you're bringing up a few terms that I think, in our world we hear a lot, but I get a lot of my clients and colleagues and friends asking, what is non-binary? Like, how do we define transgender? So can you define non-binary and transgender?
Yeah, so I get asked that all the time, especially my niche, right, in mental health. So transgender, can be seen in different ways. So there's a definition of it being like an umbrella term for all the different genders that are diverse, right? And then it also means just somebody that has not identified with the assigned gender at birth. So when we're babies, we get assigned either boy or girl, so male or female, and some people don't identify with that. They actually have a gender identity that's different from what somebody picked for them. So that's transgender. Same thing with non-binary. So non-binary is, the difference is that it's not a binary, meaning it's not male, female, trans female. It can be a little bit of both. It could be neither, right? It could just be non-binary, right? And so there can be a lot of confusion. We're used to putting things into neat, perfect boxes.
Yes.
And so non-binary can make people feel confused.
And I think that's where, a lot of people, as a society, we were trying to put people into boxes. Like everyone wanted to be male, female. That's how we wanted people to identify on paper. And it doesn't always match how we feel on the inside. I always tell my clients too, like, we don't live in a black and white society. Our lives are gray. And we do move like fluidly through life. So what are some of the challenges, talking about challenges that your clients are experiencing today?
Yeah. Well, I always like to share this important thing because there's a stigma about being part of the LGBT community where, like, oh, because your sexuality or your gender is different, then you're struggling and you're suicidal. But there's a really important factor of the reason why those stats tend to be so high, and it's really because of society, of people not accepting people that are different from them. And so that's mainly the issues that come up in my sessions, right, with a lot of people. That's mainly what I help people to feel validated with. Um, for example, like sometimes families, like there's many families where maybe they are accepting, they are loving and supporting of their child's identity, but as a family, they struggle with society, how people perceive them, that, are people rejecting us, right? Do I have to like explain, right, what is non-binary, transgender? And it can be exhausting and scary also.
And I think I've seen in my practice too, where parents that I've worked with, you know, when a child is coming to them and introducing something new to them, I think their biggest fear is, what will society put on my child? Is my child going to have to experience these microaggressions, this aggression, this phobia? And
Right.
that's one of the biggest concerns that they have.
Absolutely. And it's a valid fear. And I say, like, it will happen, right? There will be those microaggressions. There will be, unpleasant experiences, right? And as parents, like, you usually try to keep your kids, as safe as can be. But this is a reality. And if your child, identifies the way that they do, the most important thing is to support that, right? And for you to be their ally, their advocate, so that when things are rough outside, at least they have you. They can go back home and know that I'm going to have my people there that get me, and they're going to be there for me.
Right, having that one safe person. Like, we don't need a whole group of safe people. We really
Right.
need that one safe person to go to. And it doesn't always have to even be a parent. When I talk to my clients, I'm saying, tell me about your family or your family choice. Because oftentimes we don't identify with our family. We can't choose our family. And sometimes our family isn't supportive. So if you're out there and your family isn't supportive, well, a family does not always have to be blood. It can also be a family of choice.
Right. Yeah, and I love that you do that. Like, what's your family choice? Yeah.
Family choice. I like that. I like that too, and I think it really opens up because sometimes we can have an even much stronger connection with somebody outside our family. This isn't a choice. I didn't make this choice. I didn't make this choice of who I'm sexually attracted to. I didn't make this choice of what gender I identify with.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so the science, like, there's still a lot more that we need to learn about. The most important thing is just gender identity is what the individual, identifies with, and we need to respect that, right?
And how young are you seeing people starting to really realize, wait a minute, not everything is matching up with me and my body?
Yeah, so it could be as young as 3, as young as somebody can speak. Sometimes it's later on. So since I work with the teenagers, I don't work with the little ones. So with the teens, like middle school time, that's the majority where they start to really feel that gender identity becoming more concrete. Um, and it's puberty time, so there's a lot of things that are challenges, right? Some people later on in life, as an adult, an older adult, they realize, you know, my identity is a little bit different than what I've been, maybe feeling before. Because the thing is that gender is fluid, right? So for some of us, it may feel really concrete, so it can be difficult to try to understand, right, how gender could be fluid, but it is, and for some people, that identity can shift through their lifetime, right? And it can happen to any of us. We just we don't know.
Right. And I think if you've noticed this even in yourself, like sometimes we really shift even through just phases of our lives. Like sometimes we're feeling more towards one identity, whether it's more feminine or masculine, but we can go through these different points in a day, even.
Yeah.
But you bring up the age of 3, and I know I've told people that before in their responses, there's no way. And sometimes you can tell this, right? So the child at 3 years old is not going to come out and tell you what is going on, but you can notice it in how they're identifying with their words. Sometimes you can even notice it in the other children that they gravitate towards. At that age, it's very common for the children to gravitate towards the same gender.
Right.
And the toys and different things. And so as adults, we'll try to then throw these stereotypic toys at this 3-year-old, hoping that they grasp it. And it becomes very confusing because the 3-year-old's not understanding because they're not, they're just being who they are. And it's more confusing for an adult. When we get to that puberty age, that can be very triggering because the kids are developing. Like, oh my gosh, my genitals are coming in. I'm getting breasts. Like, wait a minute, this doesn't feel comfortable for me. And that's when sometimes they can really be triggered to feel like, wait, this isn't matching up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where it can start to feel really strong, like those feelings of gender dysphoria, right, of being really uncomfortable with certain body areas. And I like to point out as well, because there's like a belief, which is not completely accurate, where transgender individuals don't feel comfortable in their bodies, that like they're born in the wrong body. And that is true for some, but not for everybody. And so some might actually, like some body parts or be okay with all of it, and not want to physically transition, as in like take hormones or a surgery. And either way, it's fine. It's up to the individual what they feel comfortable with. And sometimes it is medically necessary to do hormone replacement therapy or to have surgeries. And it's not just like a really easy thing that you start. So you might have to go to a therapist to get your letter, right? And then begin those processes.
Right. It becomes really challenging as, you go through it. And I think sometimes parents are like, well, I don't want to just put my child on hormones, right? Like my child's developing. What's that going to mean for their brain? Is it going to hurt them at school? And we always say as therapists, never start anything that's going to be irreversible at a very young age. So you'll kind of hear therapists saying, okay, well, we can try like the puberty blockers for some time, but don't jump right to thinking surgery, because people kind of say, let me jump to the surgery part. And that is, from what I'm hearing, like much later in life surgery.
So it depends. I believe that there are some states where teenagers are allowed to have like top surgery, so for their chest. I'm not sure about bottom surgery, but I think in Florida you have to be 18 years old minimum to have a surgery. And then with the hormone therapy, they can start like in their teenage years. And there's different pros to it. For example, when you're going through puberty around the middle school years, right, that dysphoria can go up. And what does that mean? So dysphoria can cause other issues like anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, self-injurious behaviors, right? And so we want to prevent that. We want to work on mental health, right? And sometimes that's why I said it's medically necessary to, start puberty blockers, to start hormones. And doesn't mean everybody is going to go that route, but sometimes it is really helpful. And many teens that I've seen have gotten a lot better in their mental health once they start that.
Well, I think, a lot of those negative talks and the negative mental health aspect really comes from looking in the mirror and seeing your body develop as feeling the wrong gender. So it really becomes a critical point in those prepubescent years to really dive into what can happen, because you can go down that really bad mental health route, um, but also developing in the wrong way. And then sometimes you'll see people having to reverse some of the physically developmental pieces that their body went through in the wrong gender. And that can be very difficult to come back from.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So that's another issue where long term, if somebody wasn't able to get, like, let's say hormones right at an early age in adolescence, then they will develop more into the their, how do I word it correctly? But basically, yeah, like they'll develop in the way that they are uncomfortable with, right, and are dysphoric, I want to say. And so you're right, when somebody gets older, um, certain features might be really prominent, and it's hard for individuals to feel comfortable with that or feel safe sometimes, because depending on where you are, where you go, you might feel unsafe if somebody thinks that you're trans. You might encounter some dangerous situations, and so it's also a safety thing, right, to do certain things like surgeries.
Right. And some of the pieces that, like you're talking about, that develop after puberty that are really difficult then to transition back from, is the facial structure, right? There's definitely a different facial structure between men and women. You're talking about the different bones in the hands. And I have talked to people who have gone through these surgeries later in life, and they're very painful, they're very extensive. Most of this is out of pocket. So you're getting up into the six-figure $1 million range.
Yeah.
And after. So a lot of people, one of the last surgeries they have is bottom surgery, which shocked me when I learned that, because when I thought in my mind, I was like, well, the first surgeries would be bottom. But a lot of people went for more of the aesthetic, more of the physical features on the outside, having the top surgery first. And, some of the facial features, the laser hair removal, like what people saw on the outside was the first thing they went to.
Right, exactly. And not everybody wants to have all the surgeries or any surgeries. So that's important to keep in mind too, right? I think we have the assumption, again, because our brains want to go to the binary. So we're like, well, if somebody is a trans man, meaning they identify as a man, right, then they must be planning to take hormones, do bottom surgery, do whatever it is to fit into a new binary of what a man means, right? But that's not always the case, right? So again, like, it's breaking out of that binary thinking, and that there's so many different variations and personal decisions that are made, and we can't expect that people are going to fit neatly into the binary of what we've learned of gender.
In one of the words I hear a lot in layman's terms in conversation in the community is, what will pass? Do they pass? Do I pass? Can you just expand on this concept of quote unquote pass?
Yeah. So passing, and it's also stealth is another word for passing, which is basically that you pass as a gender that you are. Nobody will question if you're trans, right? They just will assume, okay, that's a man or that's a woman, right? And it'll be the accurate gender identity for that individual. Some people, maybe a lot, have that goal to pass for different reasons. So safety, right? Not having to deal with discrimination, with violence. Some people feel like, well, it'll be easier with dating because people are going to be judging and people are going to, have their own biases. So there's so many different things.
Right. And also, this idea of passing has to go through what society says is more masculine and more feminine. So you're going on this, and a lot of that can be set by the media. And then we can get into all these types of getting to extreme plastic surgeries and disordered eating, wanting to pass. And we can really go down that rabbit hole of, well, I have to look like what's on the cover of the magazine.
Yeah.
And this concept of passing can really lead to a lot of mental health issues in itself.
It can. And again, there's nothing wrong with wanting to pass, right? I think everything is like, as humans, we have to do our internal work, right? And it's okay, because in the end of the day, we can't remove ourselves from Earth and society.
No.
Yeah, so it kind of reminds you of like diet culture. We can't run away from it, and so we're all influenced by it, of like what we're supposed to look like and things like that. So it's okay if you want to pass. It's whatever makes you happy, really. I really believe in that, right? To allow individuals to do what is good for their mental and their physical health, you know.
Right. So switching from that subject, going to the question of this entire podcast, we are a culture of celebrations and parties, for sure. I want to know how you feel about gender reveal parties.
Yeah, so they annoy me, I'll be honest.
To be quite frank.
Yeah, like, not saying like, okay, you can't have your party, but they become so strongly into, is it a boy or girl? And it's all, baby showers do those even happen? Those were the thing. And now it's gender reveal parties. So it's always been about boy or girl, of course, but they've gotten more obvious and very extravagant, and which can be, in my opinion, a little dangerous for trans and non-binary individuals. And I'm not saying that people that are having the parties are dangerous or trying to hurt people.
It sends a message, though.
It sends a message, whether you're aware or not about it.
Mm-hmm.
There are trans individuals that feel it's hurtful. And I did some research on the history of it, because it's not that old. It's just been a few years, right, where we've been seeing these on social media of all these videos and like the powders coming out of the car.
It's so extreme.
Yeah. Which I can see how it's fun, right? And so I did some research on how it started, and there was this woman, I think her name is Jenna. There was several articles about her being interviewed. So she did a gender reveal party a few years ago, because she said she was bored and wanted to make something fun with her family. And so she did her party, shared it on her blog, because she shared it on her blog, and then somehow that like got spread around, that it became like part of culture now in the US and the UK. And she says that she regrets this. She regrets that she did it, and because of everything that's happened, because she doesn't believe in this binary system. And funny enough, she had a daughter, right, a cis female, meaning assigned female at birth and identifies as female, from what I read. And her daughter dresses in tuxes, and her daughter teaches her about, gender diversity, and she's like very into that. So it's interesting how that turned out from having that gender reveal party.
But you bring up a really good point about the gender reveal party, and it does send these messages to people who maybe don't identify as male or female, or want to transition into a different gender. But it sends these, and I think we as a society send these messages all the time. So we're calling them like microaggressions. If you've heard that, if you listeners have heard that term before, microaggressions, it's when you're sending these messages inadvertently, but they really have a negative impact on the other person. And we do it all the time. I know as being a sex therapist, I get this a lot. I have gotten from so many people, wow, you're a sex therapist. Thanks for doing that. Somebody has to do it. Like it's a chore. And I'm sorry, but this is my life passion, right? So that is a best intention from the other person. Thank you for applauding me on my career. But right, the way it made me feel was very like, not right, not myself. Like I couldn't be proud of who I was. And I think we do this inadvertently all the time. And that's why I love GLBTQIA month, because it highlights some of these microaggressions that we're experiencing, and we don't even know we're doing them to other people. And we talked about one on another podcast, Roxanna, about hello, ladies and gentlemen. What message does that send to all these people in the audience? Because you are in a large audience, you are definitely talking to somebody who is transgender, intersex, non-binary. And how does that make them feel?
Excluded and invisible, right? I mean, if we were to close our eyes and put ourselves in that situation, right, and everybody is calling you, let's say, by the wrong name or the wrong pronouns, people are addressing ladies and gentlemen, right, and you don't identify as either, like how might you feel?
And right now, also in schools, we're dealing with bathroom situations. And these are just the very blatant microaggressions, challenges that this population has. And I'm sure there's so many more that we're not even aware of. And that's why we always have to keep learning and listening and listening to these podcasts and hearing from the therapists and allies who are really in there talking to them and what they're experiencing.
Right, absolutely. And that's a lot of my passion, right? So it's to advocate. And when I mean advocate, like I literally mean like any chance that I get to say something that is advocating, right? Like if it's with family members, right? Or somebody, whatever, they make some comment or they're making assumptions, right, about trans individuals. I can jump in and I can nicely, correct them and tell them why. And sometimes we end up having conversations and it seems like they're getting it.
And these conversations are not easy. And I think a lot of us put it off as, well, it's not my responsibility to educate the person who is making this insensitive comment. So we're kind of like, well, it's not my job. It's not my place. And I really think it is everyone's place. Like in order to make equality, people have to speak out for these things and have these conversations. So I would encourage you to take that place instead of shying away from it.
Yes, and it means that you will make mistakes, right? You will get called out for making mistakes. It's happened to me a few times. And the important thing is like to be there with an open mind, because part of allyship is that, you can take in some constructive feedback and you can be accountable. And, just like I said earlier in this podcast, I learned something new about, the biological aspects of gender identity. And I still don't know everything about that. What I know more about is mental health, which is my field. So with allyship, there's just always going to be something new to learn.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. All your links to your Instagram and your website will be in the bio below. So thank you. Do you have any last tips for our listeners?
Just be kind, respect people, and don't assume that you know what's best for the individual, even if it's your kid.
Thank you, Roxanna, for sharing all the details of your private practice. I'm so excited to announce that next week is all about masturbation. And if you caught my last post on Instagram, it was all about how to get acquainted with your partner's vibrator. It's not something to be feared or intimidated, but I'm going to give you all the tips and tricks that you need to know to have your best masturbation session. Also, I'm really excited to announce that I have just become partners with the Rabbit Company and the Malibu Company. So I will be using some of their products throughout my videos and how to enhance your pleasure pathway. But until then, go out and have great sex.